Hi, Nathaniel Rumpelstiltskin here with your breaking news report. Marcus Sellars, the acclaimed, the famous Marcus Sellars, has come out on Twitter to let the world know in a since-deleted tweet, in fact, a deleted string of tweets, that the Nintendo Switch is going to get a new version next year. As always, Marcus Sellars is the most trustworthy source of news on the planet, of course next to yours truly. Also, in other breaking news, the sky is falling. I actually learned this from a movie I recently watched called Chicken Little. Yes, Chicken Little. Everything that chicken says must be true. Also, I think I ate something bad today at a birthday party. I think. I don't know. And this has been Nathaniel Rumpelstiltskin with your breaking news report. Hey folks, so with all seriousness, there has been a big thing floating around on the internet today, and yes, Marcus Sellars is the one who got the conversation going, but I want to note here that Marcus Sellars is not necessarily the only source of this information. Now, we are talking about a potential new Nintendo Switch next year, whether Nintendo calls it a new Nintendo Switch, or if they call it, a Switch Pro, or Switch XL, or Switch Mini, or whatever they call it. There's a lot of reports and a lot of rumors floating around on the internet that there is going to be one releasing next year. It is something I myself have actually speculated on and feel like is possible, if not 2019, 2020. But I could see a 2019 revision if they want to kind of get a jump starting and at least appear on the surface to be keeping up with whatever new generation stuff is coming from PlayStation and Xbox. That being said, I think it's funny that Marcus Sellars is getting all this attention today. I've dove down the Marcus Sellars rabbit hole before. I think many other Nintendo channels have as well, and there's probably still Nintendo channels that do. Reality is that Marcus Sellars is not a reliable source of anything. In fact, he makes, calling him a rumor monger makes actual rumor mongers look bad. Saying he's a person that has actual inside sources is making people who have actual inside sources look bad. I have actual inside sources. I don't use them in terms of reporting, but I do use them to help verify some things because I don't want to get them in trouble, right? Their connections to me are a little too close to the vest. However, I will say this: when you have people contacting Marcus Sellars behind the scenes in Twitter DMs and just making stuff up to him, saying, I work at this company, and here's what I know about this game coming out on this. And then within hours, you see Marcus Sellars tweet that stuff out, and all the guy did was just make up a bunch of complete BS. He did no verification, nothing. It lets you know that Marcus Sellars is just a wannabe hack who wishes he was Liam Robertson, who wishes he was Emily Rogers, who wishes he was, I don't know, maybe Laura Kate Dale? He wishes he was someone who had legit connections within the industry, but he's not. That being said, a lot of the stuff he talked about and a lot of stuff that has since been deleted, and I've got a lot of this extra information from Rich at Review Tech USA, so I'm going to give his video a shout out. I also want to give a shout out to Super Metal Dave. He's kind of the one that inspired me to want to talk about this because he talked about it, and it turns out a lot of the stuff talked about is stuff he's talked about from his own sources, at least as far back as July. And I want to get into this because I do think we're going to see a Switch revision next year. I think it's happening regardless of what it is, Switch Mini, Switch XL, Switch Pro, new Nintendo Switch, Switch 2, whatever it is, I think there is one coming next year. But here's what Marcus Sellars said, and I take pause with some of this stuff. So first off, it says a new Nintendo Switch version is coming in early 2019. It's going to have 8 gigabytes of RAM, 120 gigabytes of internal storage. It will contain 4K upscaling. It's going to have some third-party games that are exclusive to the new Switch. They won't be required to support both. However, every single Nintendo game will support the OG Switch and the new Nintendo Switch. There will be streaming services on there, such as Twitch, and an example of an exclusive third-party game that will be on that, but not on the OG Switch, would be Resident Evil 2 Remake, which apparently is going to be on this new hardware and not the old hardware. And then we got some additional details from what Marcus Sellars reportedly told Rich at Review Tech USA in private DMs, such as the fact it's using a Tegra X2. The current Switch is going to get a price drop soon. The new Nintendo Switch is going to cost anywhere between $300 and $350 USD. The new Nintendo Switch will have an SSD, and apparently the source of this information Marcus Sellars is using has not been wrong about her prediction yet. Now remember, though, all this is coming from Marcus Sellars, the liar, Marcus Sellars, the guy who just believes anything anyone tells him, the guy who repackages 4chan and Reddit rumors, the guy who just scours the internet for any little morsel that potentially could have something and just throws it out on the internet. And he throws so much crap at the wall, some stuff sticks. So yeah, you can find evidence of stuff that he was right on. Sure, totally. But there's a damning amount of things that he was wrong on, like significant, like 75% of the stuff he's put out there has not been right. You guys can fact check that if you want. I don't know if it's actually 75%, but it's a lot of things have not been right. And there's a lot of things in here that give me pause. Let me know he doesn't know anything he's talking about. And this is just understanding the way technology works and the way that Nintendo works and their approach to things. Now, I don't think the 8 gigabytes of RAM is necessarily as far-fetched. I think upgrading RAM, while a bit pricey, is something that is wholly possible. I don't think jumping from 4 to 8 is an impossibility here for a new Switch, especially if you're going for a slight upgrade. You could argue they should go 6 instead of 8 for a slight upgrade, but I'm sure a lot of third parties have been telling Nintendo, hey, if you just had a bit more RAM, we could bring our games over. So fine, I jumped to 8. Nintendo might fight back on that. Well, sure. The 128 gigabytes of internal storage, I think, is complete hogwash. I don't think Nintendo's going to do it. Do I think Nintendo should do it? Probably, but they're not going to. And here's the one reason they're not going to do it. The storage they are using is NAND flash. And yes, while GPU prices and all that have recovered from all of the crypto mining stuff, the pricing on things that haven't recovered yet has to do with NAND flash, which includes RAM sticks and SSDs. SSD and RAM stick pricing has not really gotten any better because there is still a worldwide shortage on NAND flash. Because NAND flash is the type of memory being used in smartphones. It's being used in computers. It's used in practically any modern day electronic device. So since everyone's using this NAND flash, it leads to a shortage worldwide. Thus, putting 128 gigabytes of NAND flash in there, essentially, taking the current module and making 4 of them, or 2, or 1 just larger module, is something that would be a cost passed on to consumers, because Nintendo is not, I repeat, not going to sell their systems at a loss. They rarely, if ever, do that. And the only example out there of them doing that with the 3DS was they actually launched it at a price that was profitable and then cut the price due to low sales. Same was true with things like GameCube and stuff like that. So reality is Nintendo does not sell things for a loss. They're not going to put 128 gigs in because it's going to be too expensive. That cost passed on to consumers is going to be something Nintendo's not willing to do, and consumers aren't going to be willing to pay for being realistic. I do think they will up it to 64 gigs if I have my say on things. That doubles the current memory. It gives you enough for basically any game that ever releases on the platform, but it's still something that you're probably going to still need a micro SD card, especially if you're buying physical AAA games or if you are buying digital. If you're going digital, it doesn't matter how much they put in there. You're not going to have enough anyways. The other thing is he says it'll be an SSD. That's stupid. They're not putting an NVMe SSD in there. Do you want the Switch to cost $500? They're not putting an SSD in this thing. They are using NAND flash. And here's the thing. It's really weird to hear the term SSD because all SSDs are a grouping of NAND flash on a board. This is why SSDs are actually so popular. There's no moving parts in them, right? They are just groupings of NAND flash. Now, there's different qualities of NAND flash. There's higher quality SSDs, lower quality SSDs. That's why you can see such a big speed variance, but it's already using NAND flash memory. It has no reason to put an SSD in it. They would just increase the amount of that memory already in there. They would just take out the separate memory module that contains all your information and just put in a bigger one. They would not put in a literal SSD. So again, hogwash BS. The 4K upscaling. The only thing that needs to happen, and this is why I think this is weird. Your TVs, I don't know if you know this, if you have a 4K capable TV, it already upscales everything to 4K for you. 4K upscaling sounds nice. 4K upscaling sounds pretty. It's a nice marketing term. But guess what? 4K upscaling is already a thing that exists on the TV that you have. Nintendo's not going to add an upscaler to the Switch that that makes the system output at 4K internally, because doing that ups the price of the product, and they don't need to do that when your TVs already do it. No, I'm not saying every TV does it well. Certain TVs do it better than others, and you could talk about how maybe this eliminates some of the differences between the TVs by having it as an internal upscaler, but that's just going to increase the Switch price even more. They're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. The only thing you could hope for out of a system like this, especially using a Tegra X2 as he claims, is that you are going to get 4K Netflix and 4K Amazon Prime and 4K YouTube and all that stuff, that it supports a 4K output. With a 4K output, just like an Xbox One S, you can get all those games at 4K, but you're still going to offload the upscaling of video games to the TV. You're not going to make an upscaler custom for the Switch to do that. You're going to let the TV do that. It keeps the cost of the system down. You allow native 4K output for things like video players, but that's native. They're not upscaling those videos. That's native 4K. They're not going to allow native 4K for video games, or they're not going to allow upscaling either. They're just going to let your TV do it because your TV already does it, and most 4K TVs do it just fine with 1080p products. There's not a lot of complaints about 1080p upscaling on 4K on TVs out in the market. Now, that being said, things like adding streaming, sure, that's just a copy-paste of what Xbox and PlayStation does. I don't know that Nintendo's actually going to go that far. Nintendo is, their creators program itself bans people from streaming. So, I don't know. I don't think that Nintendo's gung-ho about supporting the streaming side of things. Outside of that, everything else I think seems plausible. A Tegra X2. I want to talk about the Tegra X2 for a moment because it is a slightly more powerful chip than the Tegra X1. It is not a next-generation leap. It is not something that's going to give you 4K gaming. It is not something you're even going to notice in most games. Most of your current Switch library is going to run basically identically the same on a Tegra X2. There are a few things to note about the Tegra X2. Tegra X2 is technically using a more modern architecture than the Tegra X1, so you get a little bit of benefits of the more modern architecture. The CUDA cores are exactly the same, so it's basically producing the same sort of power, but it's doing that same sort of power with a bigger memory bus limit, so you can actually exchange more data a little bit quicker across it. And then on top of that, it's more power efficient. That's really the big change. Going from Maxwell to Pascal makes it a more power efficient chip. So you're basically getting essentially the exact same power of a Tegra X1 with faster transfer rates, which gives it that slight boost, right? You're going to notice that slight boost in development. And then also it doesn't cost as much on the battery. This is where it could lead to things like a 1080p screen, or they gotta say screw it and allow the system to have a longer battery life, go from 3 hours to 5 hours, or whatever they can squeeze out of that battery with a more power efficient chip. What's also possible is because it's a more power efficient chip, it might actually run at a cooler temperature with, even using the current Switch cooling solution. That being the case, they might not need to downclock the chip. Now, this is important to note because the stock Tegra X1, which that is what the Switch uses, a stock Tegra X1, is downclocked inside of the Switch due to heat concerns. And because it's downclocked, there is not a Switch out there without being modified that is getting the full performance of the Tegra X1. Thus, you could see what could be the full performance of a Tegra X1 with an X2, because with the lower power draw, it has a lower amount of heat being thrown out there, and thus you might see essentially a power boost that isn't necessarily a next generational leap. We're talking a new Nintendo 3DS or 3DS XL versus a 3DS kind of leap. Yes, it's noticeable. Yes, it is significant in certain aspects, but overall, games are generally going to look and play exactly the same across them. Now, I want to get to Review Tech USA's points that he made at the end of his video, and I'll have a link down to his video and a link down to SuperMetalDave's video on this, and obviously whatever links I can find to Marcus Sellars stuff, which are all deleted at this point. His points are that they'll be doing this too soon, and I I thought he was wrong on that at first because he was comparing, it to PlayStation 4 Pro, Xbox One X, which I don't think are good comparisons. I think you should compare this to the new Nintendo 3DS XL because Nintendo's already done this. But Nintendo actually released that almost 4 years after the 3DS came out. So I thought it was a lot sooner than that. The early years of 3DS, I don't remember being that pretty, although there was a lot of good games. But it was 4 years in. So I got to give credit where credit's due. Nintendo didn't even do a new Nintendo 3DS XL until 2015 in the United States. It feels like it's been a lot longer than that, doesn't it? Anyways, that being said, I don't know that it's too soon because, one, it's using mobile technology that moves very, very fast. The competitors are moving into their next generation systems, and Nintendo themselves is probably seeing in some third parties saying, if it just had a little bit more, we could do it. If it just had a little bit more, we could get the performance we want within the games we want to put on the system. And I think Nintendo looks at it and says, look, we can do that. We can give you that. Now, as for games not, because Rich Review Tech USA goes on to say that games not being required across platform is going to be bad and it's going to be like a death knell. The new Nintendo 3DS XL does not allow certain third-party games cross-platform. Let me give you an example. This feels like a weird example, but it's absolutely true. Minecraft. Yes, folks. Minecraft that runs on like every device on the planet does not run on an OG 3DS. It only runs on a new Nintendo 3DS XL or a new 2DS XL, if that was the case, etc. It only runs on the newer 3DS models. Why is that? I don't know. I'm not the developers. But reality is there are other third-party games on the 3DS that are like that. It hasn't stopped those third-party games from becoming massive sales success, and it hasn't stopped the 3DS itself from collectively selling, significant margins. And from the introduction of the new Nintendo 3DS XL forward, that cannibalized all of sales moving forward. A lot of people upgraded. Anyone getting a new Switch would just go to that. So ultimately, I think a lot of this stuff is going to end up being right in so much of it's just a logical conclusion. Now, early 2019, I don't think is happening. I think they're going to take advantage of holiday 2019, and so they're going to keep Switch at its current price through this holiday season because they're going to see a bunch of sales from Pokemon and Smash anyways. Then you'll see a price drop around E3, and that's when they will announce that they are releasing a new Nintendo Switch or whatever they call it late 2019 for the holidays. Then a price drop down to like $250 or whatever. Maybe do they dare go to $200? I think they'll go $250. Launch the new one at $300. Maybe $350 if they go two models, if they go a 64 gig and a 128, but I don't think that 128 is going to happen. I think they're going to try to keep it at $300, and you're just going to get what's essentially the same thing that maybe has other improvements. See, I would like to see other improvements along the way. I would like to see them fix the nubs that when you connect your Joy-Cons to the side of the thing. I would like to see them use metal instead of plastic. I would like to see them use metal rails in general on the actual Joy-Cons, because the thing is, those rails are becoming loose at times, and people have that loose Joy-Con problem. Thankfully, it hasn't happened to me yet, but it is something that, if you just put too much pressure on your Joy-Cons, it's going to lead to loose Joy-Cons, and that's not something anyone wants to have. A lot of people have had, some Joy-Con drift issues. It's starting to become common. We've seen some overheating issues at times, causing things like bend-gate or just, cracking of like the back plate. Maybe they need to use a higher grade plastic. There's a lot of little things they can improve with Switch. Getting rid of the big giant bezel on it. That would be a nice step up that might not cost Nintendo a lot of significant money to make a better version of Switch. And as for it being too soon, I just don't know. At first, I wanted to say Rich Review Tech USA was wrong, but I'm going to stick by it because I think that the way mobile technology works, the way that it's a tablet, we're talking to almost, 2.5 years by the time I think it's going to come out. So we're going to be very close to the 3-year mark, and having a new piece of mobile technology come out every 3 years when new technology is coming out yearly doesn't really seem that bad. In fact, my main concern is that by the time it rolls out in 2019, we're already know about PlayStation 5 and Xbox Next, and when that happens, is a Tegra X2 really going to be that impressive of a showing? That's not what I was hoping Nintendo would do. I was hoping by 2020, 2021, we get a Switch Pro that is using brand new technology that isn't currently out. But that's my dream. You guys let me know what you think about all this down below. Let me know what you think about the little beginning bit we did. Again, a little bit different take on today's video, but that's that's my thoughts on everything. A little longer than I wanted it to be, as it usually is when we're talking about something like this. All right, folks, I'm Nathaniel Rufflejans from Nintendo Prime, and if you like this video, you know what to do, and if you dislike the video, it's all right, hit that dislike button, subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.